Alright, good morning. Hey, I'm doing the E66 BMW 757 series with the N62 4.8 liter engine and oil thermostat. I'm replacing all of the O-rings, all of the seals. It's the one that's right behind the alternator bracket. You got to drop the power steering pump, you got to take the alternator out. There's all kinds of stuff, but this is spitting oil everywhere. You see the videos on what gasket it is, but mine happens to have the actual oil cooler. You can kind of see up there. I'll get down here a little bit. But I didn't disconnect any of the power steering lines. I just lowered it down, loosened up one of these bolts here to allow the lines to be free. And that's just a little clamp that holds that angle right there. I didn't disconnect anything else, so we're not gonna have to worry about changing out those crush gaskets, but you might have, if you do have to take that out, you're gonna need to replace those. Alternator comes right out. You kind of manipulate it out a little bit to get it down, but in the end it's all these different things. I've already started putting up the bracket. I've installed some of the motor mount. You have to remove the motor mount, and I'll show you that here shortly. But there's all kinds of different... You're going to need Torx sockets along with Torx bits. This is the front of the alternator bracket, but it's a Torx bit. There's 13 millimeter randomly. There's some Torx sockets. Between 16 millimeter, 13 millimeter is the majority of what you're going to be using for a lot of these bolts. The one thing that I didn't know is the actual bolts that hold the thermostat to the bracket are hex key. So the hex key that you're going to need is this one right here. It's a 5. So that's the hex key you're going to need to remove the thermostat. You'll need to remove the thermostat because right behind the thermostat is a couple bolts on the bracket that you're going to have to take off, and I can show you that here shortly. Let's get under there real quick and I'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So under here, here's where the thermostat, the oil thermostat is. Some of these N62s have a block-off plate, and that's the ring underneath there that's going to leak. This happens to have the actual thermostat with the ports flow and return to the oil cooler. I just installed the motor mount bracket. So first thing, as you put up this bracket, you already have the motor mount out. There's two Torx sockets that you're going to need there. Those come out. Take those two bolts out. There's bolts on the back side, and then there's one Torx bit or Torx socket at the top of this strut, or what would normally be, I guess, a strut, but it's the motor mount bolt that bolts to the frame rail. That whole motor mount is so light, comes right out, and then right behind the motor mount is another bolt to this bracket. So don't try to start prying on the bracket if you think you got all the bolts out and you're going to be able to get it out. There's another bolt behind the motor mount that you have to take out. So these bolts mount into the bracket, and then there's one more 16 millimeter bolt that mounts this bracket in. I've already replaced the gasket behind it. It's different than the one with the block-off plate. So I'm ready to go to start installing everything. There's a bolt here at the bottom of this bracket. Bolt over there crushes that gasket into place. Then there's another Torx bit bolt that goes to mount to the block up top here. And once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and put the thermostat housing on, or the thermostat on with the hex bits, bolts. Throw that in there. And then once I get that on, I'll come back out and let's go forward. All right, hey, this is the motor mount for that bracket. What I'm using is 12-inch. It's probably about a good, maybe a 30-inch extension here. But to get down to that socket, it's the top of the motor mount. You can see it right there. It's that socket right there. You can reach it underneath and just get it started. Once you get it started, you just get down there with an E12. Just get an E12 socket. This is a Torx socket. Torx. So E12, get down there and just tighten that socket up. Alright, here I'm at a point. I got the thermostat back in. I'm getting ready to put the hex bolts back in. I've tightened up the motor mount. You see the motor mount back there. The top Torx bolt I was able to put in using a Torx socket. I think that was the E12. And then it has used the E12 on 4 bolts that mount to the block. So the motor mount's in. Now I'm putting the 2 hex bolts lower, and then the upper is right up top there. I replaced the O-rings on the back side of the thermostat. I replaced the O-rings on this side of the flow and return lines for oil. So now I'm going to have new O-rings here, new O-rings back here. I put the new gasket on the back side of this main bracket. It's that there's a gasket that goes right back there. That's the one that you see that's causing all the leaks for those block-off plate ones, or here's the one with the actual oil cooler. So that's about it. I put putting all the bolts back in. Then I'm gonna go ahead and once I tighten that up, I'm gonna put the center post on this, the oil lines, hook that back up. Everything else here is pretty much done. I can wrap it up. I can put that alternator, put the alternator back up in there, run the power steering back up, link it all back up, and once it's back up on that bracket, it's a done deal. That leak, which leaked everywhere, this was completely soaked in oil. You can see all the way back here. This has been leaking for at least 6 months straight. Oil everywhere. So hopefully this will do it, and that's fantastic. Outstanding.